crime? How do I know it's a hate crime?
A hate crime is... we class hate crimes as race, religion, disability, homophobic, transgender, that all of those heads and any hostility based on those premises, and it's the perception of that by any individual in the chain of reporting. It might be an administrator in our office who has a quick look at what's coming in and sees, oh, this looks like a hate crime to me, flags it up. Then the prosecutor, when they get hold of it, will look at that with a positive view to seeing whether that can be prosecuted as a hate crime with a view to seeking an uplift from the courts.
So if I feel it's a hate crime, it will be treated as a hate crime?
Well,
and if you can prosecute it?
If we can prosecute it within the statutory framework, we will.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Esbro from Market Harborough. I'd like to know, how do you handle it if it is youngsters, children and teenagers involved in perpetrating it? Because clearly they have to learn that they mustn't do it, and they have to learn that very, very firmly. But at the moment, as you have mentioned, I think everybody, a lot of people in the country feel so unsettled. And the youngsters are, I think some of them, they've got the green light, as you say, that they're tuning into this. So I'd be interested in your comments, please.
Can we take a couple more questions? Yes. And see if we can answer them all.
Hi, my name is Sean Capital. I'm just a local resident here. Really encouraging to hear you guys say you're taking this very, very seriously. A couple of things. I think we know it's notoriously very difficult to prosecute somebody on a religious crime over a race crime, because obviously there's a distinction between race and religion. So, I mean, I don't know how we're going to overcome that, because it's obviously legislation that's very difficult to prove a religion over race. So, for example, if somebody was to make a comment on a race, you can easily prosecute. If somebody was to say the same about a Christian person or a Muslim person, it's very difficult because of the laws I'm sure you're aware of. And secondly, would you be proactively taking a role in encouraging people to come in and say if they've received a hate crime or if they've suffered from a hate crime? For example, online, a lot of people from my community may not be online. So, for example, an elderly lady or a gentleman who's not savvy in these things. So would there be a secondary place if they don't feel comfortable to go to a police station, a centre where they would come comfortable? For example, Amos or Butwara, for example, to come in and speak to somebody. Because otherwise they won't. And the definition question earlier somebody gave was very good, because they're not quite sure what a hate crime might be. Thank you.
Take one more and then...
Yeah.
Diane Johnson. I live in Market Harborough, but I used to be the vicar of this church. On the 28th of May, a group of women, Muslim and Christian women who meet regularly together, held an event in the centre of Leicester called A Tree of Hope. And we had a tree, and people were invited to write messages of hope and prayers and dreams, and to put them on the tree. At the same time that we were meeting, about 200 yards down the road from us, there was Britain First. A huge number of people, a very large police presence, a helicopter overhead. We had to go through an enormous number jump through an enormous number of hoops to get permission to do what we were doing. I'm told that these people just come and set up. Now, they are perpetrating hate. They're preaching hate. People were coming from that demonstration and saying horrible things are being said down there. What control have you as police over what goes on in a situation like that?
Here are 4 easy questions for you.
Shall I start off with the first couple of those? The last two. Sorry, the last two clearly relate to policing. So looking at youths, what happens with youths in Leicester and Leicestershire, we are blessed with a very, very well-versed youth panel. It's the envy of many other cities and counties. That panel includes the police and the youth offender service, and they scrutinise cases which come before them, and they apply a statutory matrix of scores relating to offences and decide upon whether a case should be dealt with by the Youth Offender Service through a programme that they are able to run, or whether it necessitates a prosecution. Now, if someone denies their involvement in the case, then the Crown Prosecution Service will have to consider that for prosecution. If there's enough evidence, it would be very rare indeed if a hate crime were not prosecuted. If it's a serious hate crime, then of course it will end up in court. But the preponderance of guidance from the centre is rather against incriminating youths. By the same token, and I don't know very much about this, but I know that there's a groundswell of work being undertaken in schools, and I know that victim groups are involved in working in schools to tackle this sort of misbehaviour. Now, the second question relating to religious or race hate crime, yes, they can be a little bit more difficult to prove, religious hate crimes. There's a statutory definition which we have to apply, whether it's hostility demonstrated or motivated wholly in part on presumed membership of religious group or an actual membership of that religious group. It very often does go hand in hand with a race hate crime, and quite frankly the perpetrators very often get it wrong as to which religion someone may or may not be affiliated to. So they're often prosecuted in the alternative. I don't think I can say very much more than that, to be truthful. I'll pass you on to my colleagues who can deal with all four. You've got a mic, okay.
To answer your question, sir, initially, I'm aware in other areas of the country there are, and I was talking about it as we sorry? Yes, that there are these hate crime reporting centres where people can go into chip shops and news agents and other places to report hate crime. In Leicestershire, we're very visible to the communities that we police. We're very proud of our neighbourhood policing and our neighbourhood officers, and one of the things that we are marked on is our visibility in the community. I can assure everyone here that on every beat in Leicestershire and Rutland, there are numerous community events, fun days, beat surgeries, all sorts of community events that allow people to approach us to report incidents. We're constantly aiming to target communities that previously we haven't had much involvement with, to break down those barriers, to show people that we are here to help, we do care. Like's been said, we do take all crime, hate crime, very, very seriously, as do everyone. So we are visible in the community. We're either walking around, cycling around, driving around. So we have a lot of front offices that are open, and obviously we have the reporting system via 101 and 999 if that's the only way that people feel that they can reach us to report these sort of incidents.
I was just going to say, to answer that. Yeah, just to add to that as well,
one of the things that obviously we do find, I know you're on about elderly people who don't have access to online. We obviously know that and understand that. There are the other traditional methods, i.e. telephone, etc. As Aidan's already mentioned, we've got the beach series. We tend to have them in places that are quite prominent. We have done them at places like Age Concern in the past. And we do use the local supermarkets, co-op, the one-stop in this area. So it's places that, you know, elderly people are likely to use as well, and we are in visible places. The other way that it tends to get reported to us is obviously by family and carers if they don't have family around. So it is quite unusual that somebody wouldn't be able to make contact with us, because people who do the caring of family members do have a duty of care towards that person. If they can't report it themselves, then generally will get reported to us in another way.
For whatever reason, sometimes people just don't feel comfortable to go to the police, whatever reason that may be. Would you ever consider a secondary stop for them to get towards you, a step?
No, well, I think that's what we're basically saying we're doing, because if they don't come to us directly, because they can't get to a police station, they can't use online, and we do have those other facilities in place, like beach surgeries, like I said, we've got carers and family who will quite often report it to them or for them.
Just as an add-on to that, we have offices that we use within the community as well. So neighbourhood officers come out of Spinney Hill or wherever we work, and we've got kind people within the community that allow us access to their buildings to have an office there, which is great for us. So if somebody went into the co-op, for instance, in Livingston Road, I know that there's an office there, a one-stop, sorry, I apologise. And obviously somebody working in the shop could see that somebody was concerned and upset, and they were to ask that to be reported, then we've got officers there as well. Not all the time, but we are visible within the community. So we've got a neighbourhood office on Evington Park as well. So again, if one of the park wardens came across somebody who was upset or injured, then we're on hand to reach these people.
I understand what you're saying in terms of people. I think you're saying, at least, in terms of people may want to report but not to the police because they may not feel comfortable in reporting to the police, and therefore they would prefer to be able to report to a third party in some other location. I think there have been various attempts at having third-party reporting centres. To my knowledge, both in Leicester and in Nottingham. For example, Nottingham, I don't think it is at the moment, but it used to be a report. Our office in Nottingham used to be one of those reporting centres, so a hate crime could be reported straight to the Crown Prosecution Service, for example. So that may be something that we can actually look at, what the appetite is for that. And
just draw a poll. Can you put your hand up if you think having those kind of third-party centres would be a good idea?
Can you answer the Reverend's question about setting up a stall and having to go through more hoops than the racists did, please?
Yeah. Just to answer your question, I'm not aware of the incident specifically. I understand the incident and I know about the incident, however I wasn't there myself. In short, I don't know, because I'm not an officer who works in the city centre. I work at Spinney Hill, so forgive me, and it would be unfair to obviously second guess as to why you had to apply and the channel you had to apply through to be granted permission to hold your event. In relation to the incident that happened later, again, we take things like that very, very seriously. An incident like that would be looked at by very senior police officers who would meet and have emergency meetings with how we were going to manage that from a public safety point of view to protect the community. There were people, I understand, that were arrested from that incident, and also as you said about the helicopter, that was being used for intelligence purposes to capture the faces of people who were involved in that incident, who, if they weren't arrested at that time, investigations would carry on and potentially be arrested at a later time. And that's really all I can say with regards to that, because I don't know the specifics, so I do apologise.
Can we take just a couple more questions? I think we might want to move on to other things as well. Back.
I'd just like to say regarding the Britain First then coming to Leicester, and I was also aware of the women with the tree of Goodwill Notes. I felt very, very proud to be from Leicester, and I'd like to thank everybody here in this room for being part of such a lovely city where people will actually chase groups like Britain First out of town. I was a very, very proud day for Leicester.
Some questions from over here?
Just a quick comment, really. My name's David, I'm a local resident. I just want us to make sure that we don't victimise young people when we're having a conversation about perpetrators of hate crimes, and when we get round to discussing amongst ourselves about what we want to do, I think one of the key things we have to do is to reach out to young people in this part of the city. We've got huge, mixed, diverse schools at Moat, Judge Meadow, City of Leicester and elsewhere, and they're a key constituency for us if we're going to actually mobilise people to fight back against explosives and homes. Like us to all keep that in mind if possible. Thank you.
Perhaps we could involve them.